Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast. I'm so glad you're here today because we're about to dive into one of the most colorful, funny, and fascinating aspects of the English language, British idioms. If you've ever watched a British TV show or chatted with a British friend and thought, wait, what on earth did they just say? Then this episode is absolutely your cup of tea. British idioms are like tiny cultural time capsules. They reflect humor, manners, history, and the British way of seeing the world. They make conversations richer, add a touch of charm, and sometimes leave non-native speakers completely puzzled. So today, let's explore how these idioms appear in everyday British life and what they tell us about British culture itself. To start off, imagine walking down the streets of London on a drizzly afternoon. The sky is grey, people are bustling about with umbrellas, and somewhere at a cozy cafe, two friends are having tea. One says, "It's not exactly my cup of tea, but I'll give it a go." If you're new to British English, you might wonder why tea suddenly got involved in the conversation. But that's exactly what makes idioms delightful. They take something ordinary, like tea, and give it an entirely new meaning. "It's not my cup of tea" simply means, it's not really something I like or enjoy. In typical British politeness, it's a soft way to express dislike. Rather than saying, "I hate this," you just say, "It's not my cup of tea," and everything stays charmingly civil. That tells you a lot about British manners. Never too harsh, always wrapped in a layer of politeness. Speaking of charming phrases, one of my personal favorites is, "Bob's your uncle." You'll hear this when someone wants to say, "And there you go," or "It's done." For example, just follow these instructions, click save, and Bob's your uncle. It sounds so random, doesn't it? But the origin is quite funny. Back in the late 1800s, there was a British Prime Minister named Robert Cecil, nicknamed Bob, who appointed his nephew to an important position. People joked that if Bob's your uncle, success is guaranteed. Over time, it became a cheerful way of saying, "That's it, all sorted." It's still used today, especially among older generations, and it perfectly captures the British habit of turning history into humor. Now picture another scenario. You're talking to a British colleague who just got a promotion, and they say, "I'm absolutely chuffed to bits." It might sound strange, but it's actually a joyful phrase. It means I'm really pleased or I'm delighted. The word chuffed used to mean puffed up or pleased, and when someone adds to bits, it's like saying I'm extremely happy. It's warm, expressive, and a bit quirky, just like British humor itself. And if you hear someone say, "I'm dead chuffed," don't worry. It doesn't mean anything bad. The word dead here simply means very. So, dead chuffed means super happy. Of course, British idioms aren't just about happiness. They're also about dealing with everyday ups and downs in life, often with a dry sense of humor. Let's take the phrase, "keep your chin up." You might hear this when someone's going through a rough time. It means stay positive or don't lose hope. It's such a classic British expression. Simple, encouraging, but never overdramatic. It reflects that famous stiff upper lip mentality the British are known for, the ability to stay calm and composed even in tough situations. If a friend failed an exam, you might say, "I know it's disappointing, but keep your chin up. You'll get it next time." It's a way of offering comfort without being overly emotional. Then there's "throw a spanner in the works," another wonderfully British phrase. Imagine everything's going according to plan, and suddenly something unexpected messes it up. You could say, "Well, that really threw a spanner in the works." The phrase comes from mechanical work. Throwing a spanner or wrench into a machine would stop it from working properly. So figuratively, it means something has caused a delay or problem. It's a vivid way to describe a setback, often used with a hint of resigned humor, because the British have a remarkable ability to stay calm and even laugh when things don't go as planned. If there's one idiom that captures the rhythm of daily British working life, it's "let's call it a day." You'll hear this at the office when people decide to stop working after a long task. It means let's stop for now. For instance, after finishing a project, someone might say, "We've done enough for today. Let's call it a day." It's a friendly and polite way to end work, showing that people know when to stop pushing themselves. And, of course, after calling it a day, many British folks will head to the pub for a pint. That's another idiomatic part of life in the UK. Now let's talk about one that perfectly fits the unpredictable British weather. Feeling under the weather. If someone says, "I'm feeling a bit under the weather," they mean they're not feeling well. The idiom likely originated from sailors who would go below deck, literally under the weather, when they were seasick. Today, it's a gentle, almost poetic way to say you're unwell. Instead of saying, "I'm sick," which sounds direct, the British soften it. "I'm a bit under the weather." It's the same pattern of understatement and politeness that runs through many idioms. And when people start recovering, they might say they're on the mend. That phrase means getting better or recovering, not only from illness but also from emotional or life challenges. For example, after that stressful year, things are finally on the mend. There's something comforting about it, an acknowledgement that recovery takes time, but it's happening. Of course, not everything in life goes smoothly, and that's where another idiom comes in handy: a dog's breakfast. It sounds adorable, but it actually means a complete mess. You could say, "My essay was a dog's breakfast. I'll have to redo it." It paints a funny image of a messy dog bowl, food everywhere, and chaos. It's one of those idioms that turns frustration into humor, which is such a British thing to do. Interestingly, a dog's dinner can have a slightly different meaning. It might describe someone overdressed in a silly or flashy way. "She showed up to the pub dressed like a dog's dinner" means she went a bit over the top. Again, it's teasing, not cruel, just playful British sarcasm. Now let's move to something lighter: a piece of cake. If something is a piece of cake, it means it's very easy. You might say, "That test was a piece of cake." The idiom first appeared in a 1930s British military poem and is still used all the time. It's the British cousin of the American "easy as pie." And really, what's more British than comparing ease to eating cake? On the other hand, if things aren't easy at all, you might hear, "It's a tough nut to crack." That idiom means a difficult problem or person. It's used across English dialects, but the British use it often when describing tricky work situations or people who are hard to persuade. "He's a tough nut to crack," someone might say about a stubborn boss. Now, one of my favorite idioms that sums up British humor is losing the plot. If someone loses the plot, it means they've become confused or are acting irrationally. For example, "He's been so stressed lately, I think he's losing the plot." It's funny but also relatable, because everyone loses the plot sometimes. It comes from storytelling. If a story loses its plot, it stops making sense. The phrase fits perfectly with the British love for narrative and wit. Another expression you'll hear all the time is "not bad." This might sound like mild praise, but in British English, not bad often means really good. British understatement is legendary. If a British person says, "Your cooking's not bad," they probably mean it's excellent. It's their way of being modest, avoiding exaggeration, and keeping things casual. Overstatement feels awkward in British culture, so instead of, "That was amazing," they'll say, "That wasn't half bad." It's charming once you get used to it, though confusing at first for foreigners expecting direct compliments. Sometimes idioms even capture humor about social behavior. Take pulling your leg, for example. When someone says, "I'm just pulling your leg," it means they're joking or teasing you. The phrase probably came from the idea of tripping someone up playfully. British humor thrives on irony and teasing, so this idiom fits perfectly in daily banter. It shows affection as much as humor. Another hilarious one is to have a chinwag. It simply means to have a chat. So if your British friend says, "Let's have a chinwag later," they're inviting you for a friendly conversation. It's casual, cozy, and very British in spirit. Tea, biscuits, and a good chat about life. When people gossip or exaggerate, someone might say, "Take it with a pinch of salt." That means don't take it too seriously. It's the British way of saying, be skeptical. This phrase likely dates back to ancient times, when salt was thought to make food and information more palatable. In conversation, it's often used gently. "He said he once met the Queen, but take it with a pinch of salt." And if you hear someone say, "He's got a chip on his shoulder," that's not about food either. It means someone is easily offended or feels resentful. The phrase originated in the 19th century, when boys would literally place a chip of wood on their shoulder and dare others to knock it off, a challenge to fight. It's another example of how idioms often come from old, vivid customs. Let's not forget bite the bullet. This one means facing something unpleasant with courage. Historically, soldiers would bite a bullet during surgery when no anesthesia was available. Grim, right? But today, it's just a metaphor. If you've been avoiding a difficult conversation, you might finally bite the bullet and deal with it. It reflects resilience, something the British value deeply. And speaking of resilience, there's carry on, which became famous during World War II in the slogan, "Keep calm and carry on." It means to continue despite difficulties. You'll still hear it in everyday speech. It's been a rough week, but we'll carry on. It's stoic, simple, and somehow comforting. When things go unexpectedly well, you might hear, "Every cloud has a silver lining." That's an old one, but still loved. It means even bad situations can have a positive side. You'll also hear the shorter version, silver lining, as in, the traffic was awful, but the silver lining is I got to listen to a good podcast. Optimism, wrapped in metaphor. That's British idiom at its best. And when you're trying to motivate someone, you might say, "The ball's in your court." That's borrowed from tennis, meaning it's your turn to take action. British idioms often come from sports, work, or nature, domains deeply woven into daily life. Of course, not every idiom has deep meaning. Some are just pure fun. "It cost me an arm and a leg" means it was very expensive. "Break a leg" means good luck, especially before performances. "Spill the beans" means reveal a secret, while "let the cat out of the bag" means almost the same thing. "Hit the sack" means go to bed. And "once in a blue moon" means something that happens rarely. You'll hear all of these constantly. In everything from pubs to classrooms, British idioms give the English language texture. They're not just phrases. They're reflections of centuries of culture, humor, and shared experiences. When you start using them naturally, you begin to feel part of that cultural rhythm. You stop translating words and start feeling the meaning. That's the real magic of idioms. They connect you not only to a language, but to its people, their humor, and their history. Picking up where we left off, let's continue our little journey through the world of British idioms, the expressions that make everyday conversations in the UK so colorful, witty, and at times completely baffling for newcomers. By now, you've probably noticed that idioms aren't just about words. They're about a mindset. They show how the British people deal with life, with humor, politeness, understatement, and just the right dose of irony. Let's start with an idiom that captures that balance perfectly. It's not the end of the world. This is a common way to comfort someone who's upset about a mistake or failure. If you spill tea on your boss's report, or forget your umbrella on a rainy day, a typical British friend might shrug and say, "Oh well, it's not the end of the world." It's simple, but deeply cultural. Instead of drama or panic, the British tend to downplay things. They see life's little mishaps as temporary and not worth losing sleep over. This calm, collected way of looking at life, wrapped in a short phrase, is one of the many things that make British idioms feel so human. And then there's the best of both worlds. You'll hear this when someone enjoys two different benefits at the same time. For example, if someone works from home 3 days a week and goes to the office for 2, they might say, "It's the best of both worlds." It's a phrase full of balance, compromise, and practicality, all qualities the British love. It reflects how people here value moderation rather than extremes. Now let's move to a slightly cheekier idiom. The proof is in the pudding. Americans often shorten it to, "the proof is in the pudding," but the original British version is longer. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. It means that you can only judge something by trying it or seeing the results, not by appearances or promises. It's a reminder to be realistic, a value deeply rooted in British culture. So if someone launches a new product and claims it's revolutionary, a Brit might say, "Well, the proof's in the pudding." In other words, let's see if it actually works. Speaking of realism, Another idiom that captures British down-to-earth humor is as right as rain. It means completely fine or in perfect condition. If you've been ill and now you're feeling better, you might say, I'm as right as rain. It's funny that rain, something most people would complain about, represents rightness in Britain. But that's so British, isn't it? Rain isn't something to hate here. It's part of daily life. So turning it into a symbol of comfort shows how language reflects environment. Another gem is to be caught red-handed. It means to be caught while doing something wrong. The phrase comes from old laws in Scotland, where someone caught with blood on their hands after committing a crime was caught red-handed. Today, it's used playfully. For example, I caught him red-handed eating my chocolate. It's one of those idioms that sound dramatic but are used in casual, humorous ways. British idioms also reveal a lot about how people interact socially. Take to get the wrong end of the stick. It means to misunderstand something completely. If your friend thinks you were criticizing them when you weren't, you might say, "Oh no, you've got the wrong end of the stick." It's not accusatory. It's a gentle way to clear up confusion. And it paints a vivid image too. Imagine two people holding opposite ends of a stick, completely out of sync. Then there's to be over the moon. That's one of the most joyful idioms in British English. It means to be extremely happy, so happy you could jump over the moon. It became especially popular after England's 1966 World Cup victory, when a football player famously said, "I'm over the moon." Since then, it's been used by everyone from school children to grandmothers. It's emotional without being sentimental. Just a cheerful way to express pure joy. But sometimes idioms aren't about joy. They're about life's small ironies. Take a storm in a teacup. It means making a big deal out of something minor. For example, they're arguing over whose turn it is to make the tea. It's just a storm in a teacup. The image is delightful, an intense little drama happening in the tiniest, most British place imaginable, a teacup. It's also a reminder of that national tendency to stay calm, to laugh at overreactions, and to see perspective even in chaos. Another idiom that speaks volumes about British attitudes is, don't get your knickers in a twist. Yes, it sounds funny, and it is, but it means don't get upset over nothing. It's often said with affectionate humor, calm down, love, don't get your knickers in a twist. It's teasing, not rude, and very typical of the British way of softening criticism with humor. Of course, British idioms also capture the art of subtle sarcasm. For example, you're having a laugh is a common expression meaning you must be joking. It's used when something seems unbelievable or ridiculous. If someone says, you'll have to finish this 50-page report by tomorrow, you might respond, you're having a laugh. It's not aggressive, it's witty disbelief. And that's a big part of British humor, finding amusement even in frustration. And speaking of laughter, let's talk about it's not my first rodeo. This one's borrowed from American English, but it's widely used in the UK too. It means I'm experienced, or I've done this before. For example, don't worry about the presentation. It's not my first rodeo. You'll often hear it in a dry, self-confident tone, especially among older generations or professionals. If something surprises you, you might hear, well, I'll be gobsmacked. The word gob means mouth, and smacked means hit. So literally it means so surprised your mouth is smacked open. It's informal, expressive, and uniquely British. People say it when they're genuinely amazed. You got the job? I'm gobsmacked! It's warm, real, and delightfully funny. Let's take a moment to appreciate how these idioms appear in everyday moments. Imagine a scene at a London pub, a group of friends chatting after work. Someone's had a rough week, and another says, chin up, mate. It's not all doom and gloom. Doom and gloom means hopelessness or negativity, so saying, it's not all doom and gloom means there's still hope. The conversation continues. Someone spills their drink, laughs, and says, oh well, it's water under the bridge. That idiom means it's in the past. Forget it. Then someone else jokes, don't rub salt in the wound, meaning, don't make it worse. Within just a few sentences, the entire group has used 3 idioms, and they don't even realize it. That's how deeply idioms live in British conversation. They're not just language. their rhythm, emotion, and shared understanding. And then there's the idiom to be all ears. It means to listen carefully and eagerly. If a colleague says, "I've got some exciting news," you might reply, "I'm all ears." It's cheerful and attentive. A perfect example of how British English can make something ordinary sound animated. When someone makes a big decision without knowing all the facts, you might say they jumped the gun. It means acting too soon. The phrase comes from athletics, where runners start before the starting gun. It's now used in workplaces and relationships alike. He proposed after one date. Talk about jumping the gun. If someone avoids making a decision, the idiom "sit on the fence" applies. She's sitting on the fence about taking that job. Means she hasn't decided yet. It's used to describe indecision, but without judgment. It's neutral, even relatable. And for times when someone's not being honest, there's to pull the wool over someone's eyes. It means to deceive or trick someone. He tried to pull the wool over my eyes, but I wasn't fooled. It likely comes from the days when people wore wool wigs. Pulling the wig over someone's eyes meant blinding them. British idioms can also carry a certain poetic charm. For instance, to be the bee's knees means to be excellent. The phrase emerged in the 1920s, when people loved silly rhymes like the cat's whiskers or the cat's pajamas. So if you hear, "That new cafe is the bee's knees," it means it's great. On the opposite end, something poor or unimpressive might be called pants. Yes, pants. In the UK, that means rubbish or bad. That film was pants means it was terrible. Funny, right? The British love to turn everyday words into expressions of judgment, but always with a bit of humor. Another one you'll love is knackered. It means completely exhausted. "I'm knackered" is what you say after a long day at work. It comes from an old slang word meaning worn out, originally used for horses. Today it's everywhere, from office talk to casual chats among friends. Then there's to hit the nail on the head. It means to be exactly right. If someone describes a problem perfectly, you say, "You've hit the nail on the head." It's one of those idioms that work equally well in formal and informal contexts. And when someone's trying to hide their true feelings, you might say they're keeping their cards close to their chest. It means they're being secretive or cautious, like a poker player protecting their hand. He's keeping his cards close to his chest about the promotion. Again, you can see how idioms make speech visual and metaphorical. Some idioms are used when things go wrong. "It all went pear-shaped" is a great example. It means something went wrong or failed unexpectedly. The event was fine at first, but then it all went pear-shaped when the power went out. The origins aren't entirely clear, but it's widely used and perfectly British in tone. Humorous, understated, and vivid. And when someone's lucky, you might hear "touch wood" or "knock on wood" in the US. The British often say "touch wood" after mentioning something positive to avoid jinxing it. "We've had great weather so far. Touch wood." It's a tiny ritual embedded in language, half superstition, half cultural habit. Another comforting idiom is "get a grip." It means to regain control or calm down. If someone's panicking over a minor issue, you might say, "Come on, get a grip." It's firm but caring. A typical British way of saying, "Relax, you'll be fine." Now, when it comes to relationships, idioms play a big role too. To be on the same wavelength means to think alike or understand each other well. To have a soft spot for someone means to like them deeply. To go the extra mile means to make an extra effort. These idioms show warmth, empathy, and effort, values that form the backbone of social life. But life isn't always smooth sailing, another idiom. Sometimes things are tough, and that's when expressions like "to weather the storm" come in. It means to survive difficult times. We had a tough year, but we've weathered the storm. It's poetic and strong, a perfect image for resilience. And when everything finally turns out okay, someone might say, "It's all gravy." That means it's all good or everything's fine. It's cheerful, informal, and very British in its positivity. So what's the secret to using British idioms naturally? It's not about memorizing lists. It's about listening to how native speakers use them. Idioms live in tone, in context, in facial expressions. They carry layers of meaning, humor, and shared understanding. For learners, they're like keys that unlock the emotional rhythm of English. When you say, "It's not my cup of tea," or "I'm over the moon," you're not just using words. You're stepping into a cultural tradition that's been evolving for centuries. And remember, the more you listen to British shows, podcasts, or conversations, the more these idioms will become second nature. They'll stop sounding like strange puzzles and start feeling like old friends. So next time you're chatting with a Brit and they drop an idiom that leaves you scratching your head, don't worry. Just smile, ask what it means, and maybe throw one back at them. Before long, you'll be speaking like a true local. Idioms, humor, and all. Thank you so much for joining me in this deep dive into the wonderful world of British idioms in everyday life. I hope this episode has given you a few phrases to try out in your own conversations, and maybe even a laugh or two. Remember, language is not just about grammar, it's about culture, spirit, and connection. So keep learning, keep listening, and as the British say, keep calm and carry on. See you next time, everyone.